It is probably best to start from when I joined NSPPD in August 2024. On June 22nd, 2024, I was diagnosed with subarachnoid hemorrhage. That long name simply means ruptured brain aneurysm, which is a medical emergency. There are several statistics out there on its outcome. It is stated that about 10 to 15% will die before reaching the hospital and within 24 hours. Another 40% will die even if they make it to the hospital and within 1 month. It is stated that another 3 out of those who survive will suffer disability of one form or the other. It started with symptoms of severe headache, neck stiffening, my mouth feeling guarded. It was a thunderclap of headache, which was very intense and came suddenly when I was entertaining people at home on this fateful day in Cairo on the 22nd of June. I spent about 2 weeks in hospital in Cairo where I received treatment, including a certain extent, but I still had crisis after I was discharged, such that I had to be evacuated to a London hospital where I received further treatment, a reinforced stent for another 10 days to 2 weeks. I was discharged with advice to return for checkup in 3 weeks. I was grateful to God for healing. And because I hadn't been cleared to travel, I took a train with my family. My kids had come to meet me in London. They had just vacated from school. We traveled by train to Paris to begin recuperation. But here comes the story. 3 weeks down the line, August 2nd, I returned to London for the scheduled checkup. The scan revealed that the brain aneurysm had not closed. That was a rude shock. And according to the doctors, I had 2 doctors. According to the radiologist, he said the blood in the brain was still filling through what he then called a back door. Well, they kind of explained to me what the options were, and they followed it up with a written report. They gave me 2 very scary options, which were really no options at all. The first one was to retreat the aneurysm by using a certain balloon, inside it somewhere there to divert the flow. They also told me that this option, while not being certain, also had the risk of a stroke. The second option they presented me with was to do nothing because I was due to return in 6 months anyway for a further checkup and see what happens. They were also quick to let me know that that option had the risk of loss of life. Like I said, there were none options. My husband and I were initially frantic, but at some point we said, you know what, let's see God at work. The only option the way we elected for was to wait and seek the face of God, face Him squarely. At some point, we knew that this was a battlefront. At that time, I had heard of NSPPD, but I never joined. But during this period, one of them came back to me and said to me, why don't you join this platform? So I joined NSPPD fervently, wholeheartedly on Monday, August 5. At this point, I was acutely mindful that God had shown Himself strong all through the ailments that was still alive. But the fear that I was facing at that time was palpable. It was crowned with sleepless nights by virtue of the options that I had or the risks that had been presented to me. So August 6th, Pastor Jerry spoke of peripheral artery disease.
Peripheral artery disease. That is what I hear. Peripheral artery disease. If you are the one, put it on the live stream. The devil is a liar. I announce, let it be reversed.
And the root of negativity drying up.
You see the root of negativity. You see the root. You see the root. I command, let them dry up.
I have a lot of these things written down because, like I said, with a lot of time on my hands, I was tuned in every day. I was still praying for a distinct prophecy, a distinct mention about brain aneurysm. And then came September 5, and there was a testimony of a Ronke in the UK who testified that the brain aneurysm was reversed. That testimony and the associated debrief.
I hear the Lord reversing every brain aneurysm, brain aneurysm, brain aneurysm. If you're the one, put it on the live stream. About the power that raised Jesus from the dead, I command, let it be reversed right now.
That came with it was it for me. It was the evidence that I needed. I tapped into her testimony and ran with it. The following day, which was September 6th, the prophecy was, you will not die. It is settled. what you are afraid of will not happen.
You will not die, you will not die. You will not die. It is settled. What you are afraid of will not happen.
A few days later, on September 9, and as guided by the man of God, Pastor Jerry, I wrote my testimony, at least up until September 9. I wrote the testimony for what happened from June 22nd, but I also wrote the ending of the testimony. And that was that when I go back in 6 months to do the scan, that my brain will be normal with no trace of aneurysm, and that the feelings that it has seen earlier will have closed and there will be no more feeling. That's how I closed that testimony. On October 10th, I was to have an interim IVDSA, but here in Cairo, the only reason I wanted to have an interim IVDSA was in a sense to accelerate the evidence because I was a whole lot more confident. So the scheduled 6-month checkup would have been on January, but I decided to bring it forward. So I wrote the doctor, neurologist, and said to him, since the interim IVDSA assessment couldn't hold, can we do the 6 months earlier than 6 months? He jumped on it. As soon as I sent the email, he came back and said, why not? What date are you looking at? I quickly switched my prayer points on the platform. I started praying for a report on December 20th that showed the reversal of what they initially saw. On that fateful day on December 20th, my evidence was delivered. I underwent several rounds of scans at the hospital in London. I had gone into the procedure at 11 a.m. on the 20th of December, and by 2 p.m., I met with the doctor to review the scans. The doctor said to me, Mrs. Awani, I have good news for you. All aneurysms occluded. I sat back and I said, what does that mean? In layman's terms, he said, it is all closed. All aneurysms closed. He then went on to say that I can now go and sleep peacefully. You too, Mrs. Awani. And so you can imagine what will have kept even a doctor awake for 6 months, carrying a burden for somebody else. And the pastor will ask, how would you celebrate? I was numb. Numbness in awe of God. I still am numb by this God, why he elected to have mercy upon me. My sister and I ran into the car, went to the hotel where my kids were, and all we could do was burst into songs. This is an acknowledgement of how this platform helped me on this faith journey. I needed to overcome fear. I needed the encouragement of the word. I needed faith. This testimony is coming very late, actually. It's almost a year. The one thing I knew was that I needed this platform to fulfill my promise and my vow to God. And that was to share it to the ends of the earth. And I do so today with an immense heart of gratitude and thanksgiving. Thank you, Pastor Jerry. I cannot thank you enough for this commission. The oil on your head will only continue to increase. And may our good Lord bless you beyond measure. What God cannot do does not exist.